From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
The second Trump administration has been in office less than 2 weeks, and already Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Neronha has been fighting the president in court. First, Neronha joined other state attorneys general in challenging Trump's effort to change the definition of birthright citizenship, and now he's one of the leaders of a national suit to block Trump's federal funding freeze. Where will the courts come down, and what are the risks of taking on the White House? We'll discuss it all with our guest this week on Newsmakers, Attorney General Peter Neronha. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White, alongside 12 News Politics editor Ted Nesi, and we welcome back to the program Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Neronha. General, it's good to have you on the show.
Great to be back.
I want to start with the funding freeze just to set the table. 23 attorneys general have filed a legal challenge against the Trump administration's funding freeze. Federal Judge John McConnell is considering whether or not to grant a temporary restraining order, and I should note that decision could come down as soon as today, and a lot of people are watching this on a Sunday, so a lot could change. You know, we could start in a bunch of different areas. Ted and I always talk before the show, what's the first question? And I think I'm going to ask you what a lot of people have asked, which is why Rhode Island? And I do want to note that the original complaint filed at U.S. District Court in Providence said under the venue and jurisdiction section, it said that the funding freeze would harm the good people of the Southern District of New York. You guys refiled it, corrected that to say Rhode Island. But that suggests to me, at a minimum, there was a lot of discussion about where you guys were going to file this thing, right?
Yeah, there was. So, first of all, there were 5 states co-leading it, and we were one of them. So there were 23 states signed on, but we'll divide the work amongst us depending on the issue. So there were 5 states principally involved. And then the question came down to where to file. One place could have been Washington, where the other lawsuit was filed.
The nonprofit.
I felt really strongly, and most of my colleagues, if not all of them, agreed that this should not be a Beltway case or inside the Beltway case. This impacts every Rhode Islander in a myriad of ways, every American in a myriad of ways. So it needed to be out in the field, to use an old U.S. attorney term. It needed to be out in one of the states. And then, the truth is that our team, my team, worked overnight along with lawyers from New York and Massachusetts, California, Illinois. So we were heavily involved in the drafting. And then, so, I don't want to sort of give away why we choose venue, but ultimately we filed it here because we believed it was an appropriate place to file. It recognized the good work of the members of our team, which we've worked hard to build. We're in a circuit that evaluates the law carefully, and so that ultimately led to where we filed it.
But address the conventional. Let's just cut to it. Sure. The conventional wisdom is it was filed here because you have a federal bench here that right now Judge Smith is on senior status. He was a Bush nominee, but all the rest were nominated by Democratic presidents, and that's why you guys filed here. You think you got a better shot?
Well, look, I cringe as a former federal prosecutor, worked for Republican and Democratic presidents. When we've reached a point where every time we identify a judge by who appointed them, which president, and the party of the president that appointed them becomes meaningful in the outcome, I think that's why we lose faith in our judiciary. All I'm going to say is we're confident that balls and strikes will be called here. It recognizes the good work of our team. There will be other cases filed in other districts. The birthright citizenship case was filed in Massachusetts. There will be cases filed. There was a case filed in Washington State. I think it is fair to recognize the value of our team to this effort. And I think that's the principal reason that I fought hard to have the case filed there. It's a recognition of the good work and confidence in our team. And our team argued it. It wasn't like New York came up here and argued it. We argued it. Sarah Rice did it for us.
I think Jack Reed and Sheldon Ridos argue they appointed the federal bench, but we'll leave that. To one side. It was such a confused situation, certainly for the reporters, even for members of Congress, clearly in both parties. With the memo comes out, we're freezing it. Maybe we're freezing these programs, maybe not. Wait, the Medicaid portal's down. Then just hours before you all were due in court, the White House, the OMB, took back the memo, but then the press secretary tweets that only the memo has been rescinded, not the policy. Yeah. We at first thought maybe you all wouldn't have the hearing, but then she put that out, and it was clear that the policy was still in play. I mean, how strange was it to be using a tweet to argue your case that this was not a moot point anymore, that this policy was still in place?
Well, look, I think if we step back, the president, to use the phrase of his allies, is trying to engage in shock and awe Well, I think I can speak for my colleagues, certainly for myself. I'm neither shocked and I'm not awed. What this is, from my perspective, is government by chaos, and frankly, government that's not very well thought through. This is a classic example of it. There are others we may get to in the course of our conversation today. But for us, we're laser focused on what the issue is. And the issue is this. Congress allocated this money, which is our federal tax dollars, money we pay in here, all Rhode Islanders pay into, to come back to Rhode Island and our fellow states to do work here that our citizens need and deserve. And the president tried to turn off the spigot. He has no power to do that. That is not his role in our system of federalism. His job is to run the government. Congress allocates the money. This is money already allocated. It's like it's in your bank account. It just haven't taken it out yet.
The president's allies contest that.
Yeah.
They say the Impoundment Control Act gives him this is not constitutional, and the president should have this power. I mean, in some ways, it seems like they want this fight over his level of executive power.
Look, there's no level of executive power. The president wants to exert power everywhere, and it's our job where the rights of our citizens are being violated, where someone needs to stand up, we need to stand up, and you can't wait. I think leadership is as much about preparation as it is about action. We've been preparing for these moments since last summer. You prepare for the worst, frankly, and hope for the best. I think in many ways Donald Trump will be the worst case scenario in a president. The truth will play itself out over the next 4 years. But we had to be prepared for these moments and be willing to act. You can't prevaricate in that moment and sort of hope that the president's actions don't mean what they appear to mean. We know what they mean, and we know that it's unlawful, and that's why I'm confident Judge McConnell will issue the TRO that we've asked him to issue.
Why don't we talk about why the president did what he did? And actually, I'll have him say it. I want you to listen to something. After your office's court action, President Trump addressed the funding freeze before bill signing. But take a listen.
Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid have not been affected by any action we're taking in any way, shape, or form. We are merely looking at parts of the big bureaucracy where there has been tremendous waste and fraud.
So a lot of people agree with the president there, he said, and abuse, that there is significant waste in these programs. And it's a good thing that he's taking a hard line on this. And Democratic attorneys general like you are standing in the way of addressing that issue.
Yeah, so let's just start with a statement where he made a false statement. Right in that statement, that Medicaid's not effective. We know, we filed it in court, that when Rhode Island tried to draw down its Medicaid dollars, they couldn't do it. When they reached out to the federal government, CMS, why can't we draw down our money? There's been a freeze, but we're not going to put anything in writing. I've been a prosecutor for a long time. When people tell you they won't put something in writing, they know they're doing something wrong. This is government by chaos. You can't run a government by constantly shifting the ground on which the rest of us are supposed to walk. And so what I say to that is, look, if you want to go inside the federal bureaucracy, as you've described it, you want to make changes in your bureaucracy, that's for another day. What we're talking about here today is you're holding back money that you have no power to hold back, that we need to build roads, to support our schools, to support our healthcare system. I ran into somebody who runs, Meg O'Grady, who runs Meals
on Wheels
yesterday, and she told me she couldn't access her money. Now think about what that means. Those are meals that some of our older Rhode Islanders rely on to maintain their health every single day. And this president threatened it. It's government by chaos, and in the end, Americans are going to really reap the harm of government in this way.
All right, quick question on this before we go to break. Your office released a 15-page memo to give schools guidance if ICE agents show up at the doorstep.
Yeah.
First, was your office asked to do this?
Yes, RIDE reached out to us. Commissioner Infante Green called me. I happened to be with my team when she called and expressed a concern that parents were not sending their children to school for fear of immigration action.
Does your memo stoke that fear in any way? You worried that a memo like that could heighten that fear? Like, oh my gosh, the Attorney General's weighing in on something. I'm not aware of this happening anywhere else in the country, but you. Oh,
it's happened elsewhere. Yeah, Massachusetts issued similar guidance.
No. I'm sorry. ICE agents kicking in the door to a school.
Sure. But when ICE comes out or the president comes out and says schools and churches will no longer be considered off limits for ICE enforcement actions, well, then of course there's a reaction. And what we were trying to do is encourage parents, all parents, to send their kids to school because every child needs to be educated.
All right, when we come back, the future of 2 hospitals that are up for sale. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside 12 News politics editor Ted Nesi. Our guest is Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Neronha. Ted?
General, you've been working on the Prospect situation for years now. This is the California company that owns Roger Williams and Fatima Hospital. There's so much water under the bridge, but for this moment, what people should think about is that there is a pending effort to sell those to a Georgia nonprofit, but at the same time, Prospect is now in bankruptcy down, I believe, in Texas, right?
Correct.
And so I believe there have been many people expressing optimism that the sale of those 2 could still go forward despite the bankruptcy. What is your feeling today about the status and short-term future of those 2 hospitals?
Well, in terms of the sale, I'm cautiously optimistic. The parties still need to get the financing they need to close the deal, and I know there are negotiations about that. I'm cautiously optimistic that no matter what happens with that deal, the hospitals will stay open. But that's only because we're fighting really hard to do that. And we were on the ground in Dallas on the first day of the bankruptcy proceeding, the only state that was there, I might add. It goes back to what I talked about earlier about preparation and action. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but boy, we're staying on top of that one. And this isn't, I don't want to go back to what we just talked about, but the chaos created by the Trump administration, in a sense, distracts us from some of the other work that we need to do. I mean, we're capable of keeping our eye on multiple balls, but it doesn't make our job any easier. But I'm cautiously optimistic about the future of those hospitals. The men and women there really do great work.
When do you think that would, as I believe you had said previously, and I might be wrong, but the sale could go through by the end of this month. It's the 31st.
Yeah.
So when do you think it could
Well, we have to be back in the federal bankruptcy court on February 12th, and I would hope that by then we'll have more clarity on this current deal. Centurion has to get financing to close the deal, and Prospect has to make certain commitments that we ordered them to make back last June. I mean, it's taken them a long time to close this deal, but those conditions are meant to ensure that these hospitals will survive. There's no point doing a deal where the hospitals won't survive 6 months afterwards. So those conditions have to be met, and they're financial in nature. There's
been a bit of a split screen for me because I've also been covering the Stewart Hospital situation across the border in Massachusetts, which includes St. Anne's and Morton and Fall River and Taunton, which are now actually under Brown Health. A lot of crossover there. And Governor Healy had to put in a lot of state money to sort of foam the runway to get those deals across. It's part of why Lifespan/Brown Health was willing to take over those hospitals. I haven't heard yet any major allocation of funds to stabilize these hospitals at the state level in Rhode Island. Do you think that's something lawmakers might need to do to make the Centurion takeover work for those 2 hospitals?
Well, let me say 2 things. First of all, I think state support for these hospitals would make them more attractive to certain buyers, to more local buyers, I guess. And frankly, to me, that would be preferable, but that's not the situation we're in. Our work 4 years ago now, in 2021, by putting that money, that $80 million in escrow. Remember, Lifespan's getting $70 million over 7 years. We took $80 million from Leonard Green, the private equity owner, and Prospect. We still have about $50 million left. So, that preparation work that we did 3 years ago gives us the runway without relying on taxpayer funds. I mean, again, proud of the healthcare team for having that vision back in 2021. So we're better off in that sense. What concerns me, though, is that Centurion is an unproven buyer, and that's who we have to rely on here. If we don't go back to first principles, we've talked about this a lot, I won't belabor it, and fix our overall healthcare funding scheme, we're going to keep running into these problems.
All right, I want to talk about CVS. Your office sued multiple pharmacies, including CVS, for their role in the opioid crisis. I think that was in 23, right? That was 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay. Your complaint noted, quote, the volume of opioids sold in the state would provide every man, woman, and child in Rhode Island with roughly 161 10-milligram pills. and pointed out that a CVS pharmacy in East Providence purchased more than 800,000 doses, and this is for a town that has a population of 48,000 people. Helena Folks was the head of CVS Retail starting in 2014. How much responsibility does she bear in your view?
Yeah, it's hard for me to assign responsibility to individual CVS leadership, but Helena Folks has to answer that question. Look, when I read the federal complaint, as I have, because obviously I'm concerned about those allegations. You know, we were really focused on a time frame from around 2003 to 2014 in our case. The U.S. Attorney's case and DOJ, because there's a lot of other DOJ components involved in that, is really 2014 forward, which, as I understand it, is when Ms. Folks had a major role there.
For first 4 years of that period.
Yeah, so she's really got to answer to those questions. It's going to be, I think we're going to have to wait and see how the evidence comes out in that lawsuit. But I think Helena knows she has to answer those questions and convince the public that she did what she could. But there's no question that CVS helped fuel this crisis, as did other pharmacies, as did the manufacturers, as did the distributors. Look, the Google case that I did when I was very early on in my U.S. Attorney career was a opioids case. Opioids were being bought online with the assistance of Google, and we brought $310 million back to Rhode Island in that case. In our opioids cases writ large, since I've been AG, we brought back over $300 million. You know, how do I put this? You know, I'm proud of our record on opioids over the last 15 years. I think Ms. Folks has to answer for her leadership at CVS, and I'll leave her to answer those questions.
Legally speaking, could you, real quick, Ted, 30 seconds here, legally speaking, could this hang like a cloud over her? I mean, look, she's probably going to run for governor in 26. You know, could she be deposed and all this thing just as a lawyer? Is this something that could just kind of...
Well, look, I think about it as a lawyer and not as a person who ran for office. Yeah, she could be deposed. Yeah, that's possible. It seems to me the federal government is very serious about going forward on this. There were probably, I don't know this, were settlement discussions that broke down because it's taken a while, I think, to get this thing going. And certainly the U.S. Attorney's Office was able to do investigative work, even in a civil case, before filing. It's a unique thing that the government can do, as opposed to a private plaintiff. You know, I think we're just going to have to see how it plays out. So, yeah, I think, look, can she part the clouds? I think she can, but I think she has to take it head on.
All right, I want to ask you about 2026 yourself and the upcoming election. So I saw your fourth quarter fundraising report is due today. You did indeed raise some money, raise $56,000 last quarter. I don't know how many events you did, if any. No events, okay. So you'd have some money there. I mean, you know, I feel like every reporter, every time we're all in front of you, whatever outlet you're on, asks you what you're going to do. Is there any update on your thinking about whether to run for LG or something else in 26?
Look, you know, here's how I'm going to size it up. First and foremost, where are my family at that point in time? My kids are kind of far afield now, and I hope they're closer, but I don't know if they will be. Where's my wife in her career at that point? That's question number one. Question number two, how is my health? My health has been sort of up and down over the last couple of years.
How is your health right now?
You know, as I sit here today, it's good. You know, I have some good days, and I have some days that frankly aren't so good. So it's really pain management for me at this point. But for the most part, I feel good. I feel strong. So nothing hinders my actual work. And then the next question is, where do I think, if I want to continue to serve, where can I serve best? I like action. I like doing things. I like preparing for scenarios in advance, and when they arrive, if they do arrive, acting. I don't want a no-show job in government. Let's put it that way. So, you know, I'm going to wait and see. You know, I do think Rhode Island needs better and stronger and more prepared leadership that can attract great people at the top of our government. I'm not convinced we have it. We've talked about it before, and I don't think I need to go down that road any farther. Depending on what choices Rhode Islanders have in 2026 may move my decision in a particular way.
All right, we're going to take a break on the program. When we come back, the lawsuit in the Washington Bridge crisis. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This is Ted Nesi. Our guest is Attorney General Peter Neronha. General, I don't want to spend too much time on this. It's in litigation, so you guys are loath to talk about things that are in an active case. But the state has sued 13 vendors over the Washington Bridge meltdown. How much are you guys, and by I say you guys, I mean taxpayers, spending on lawyers and all of this, on this litigation?
You know, it's hard to characterize. No more than necessary to bring these claims. I know that doesn't really answer your question, but I don't think the expense is that extensive. Certainly, whenever we're involved in a case, there's time, and we're spending time. So I'm comfortable with it. We'll hear from Judge Stern, I think, quickly on the motions to dismiss.
All right. I want to close back where we started, which is the new presidential administration. And there are a lot of concerns. We heard the confirmation hearing for Kash Patel to lead the FBI yesterday. You were in the Department of Justice for years. How concerned are you, as someone who actually knows how that department operates from the inside from your years there, about the potential to weaponize it against the president's political enemies if he gets his people in place as he's trying to do?
Very concerned. I mean, when I was at the Department of Justice, it was a very staid place. It was hard to, frankly, being out in the field, you know, in Rhode Island as U.S. Attorney, it was sometimes hard to get them to move in a direction I wanted them to go. But that's a good thing. That stability is really important. And again, I worked for Republican presidents and Democratic ones, and there was no real change. I'm really worried about it. Just even the memo that the acting Deputy Attorney General sent, Mr. Bove sent to prosecutors about immigration cases and focusing on local officials that don't cooperate. Just a reference, I mean, first of all, it's a poorly written memo, which I guess I shouldn't be surprised at this point. But this notion that the supremacy clause requires state and local officials to do the federal government's bidding is just patently wrong. And to put that in writing, it just shows either a lack of solid legal thinking, or worse, signals that the law doesn't matter. So there are going to be fights ahead to sort of to narrow the federal government's role to its appropriate lane. You know, the states matter in the United States. And the 10th Amendment says every power not left to the federal government resides in the states. We have powers here. And so no one's suggesting we don't cooperate with the federal government on immigration. Just the opposite. We cooperate with them very strongly when it involves serious violent offenders. No one thinks that we should have a secure border more than I do. I certainly agree with that. But I worry that these policy choices are going to be wrapped in patently unlawful directives. And we're going to have to push back, all of us who believe in the fundamentals of our democracy, or this president's going to run right over us.
30 seconds. You quit X, formerly Twitter. Is Blue Sky scratching the itch for you, General? You only have like 500 followers on that.
I don't care. I'm not going back.
Oh, sure you don't care.
I'm not going back. I will tell you, I hope that more journalists migrate to Blue Sky and continue to post there, because I use Blue Sky, as I mostly use
We're on there. You can
to follow what's going on. I find it helpful in that regard.
Follow us on Blue Sky. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. Thank you, Attorney General Peter Neronha. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.